Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. I'm Jonathan Freedman, and our next guest in the studio, a serial entrepreneur, which we love to have on Radio Entrepreneurs, Mike Zani, CEO of the Predictive Index. Welcome to Radio Entrepreneurs.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know this is one of those things that, as you said, you've been on the other side of the microphone. So, I hope you don't turn the dials and make me answer the questions.
It's just a pleasure to be interviewed by a pro.
But let's talk about you. You've got a fascinating career, and the story behind the Predictive Index, which is a brand that I think many people have heard of and might not know the backstory. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you became involved with it?
We were very fortunate entrepreneurs to be able to acquire a 60-year-old company. But it started, Daniel, my business partner, and I buy used companies with other people's money. And we started that in 2002, right out of an MBA program. And
the secret sauce, figure out how to spend other people's money to leverage.
We didn't have any money, and we wanted to be in charge, and the only way to put ourselves in charge was to really buy a company. And we didn't have a great idea, so we weren't about to do a startup. So it was like restarting a previously founded company.
So you had been a client, in essence, and liked the product.
Well, in our first company, the talent strategy was such a mess. We were looking for anything to help us, and we weren't really prepared. Even having gone to a top-tier MBA program, we weren't prepared for the people side of things. So we found PI, used it, helped us turn around a company. And when we sold that first company, we tried to buy it in 2009. We was a diamond in the rough, and we sort of knew that. They just weren't ready to sell to us in 2009.
So it was a family-owned business at the time, had been since its founding.
60-year-old family-run business.
And really spawned out of academic research, thought? What was sort of the background to developing the product line?
This might freak people out, but the founder was in World War II, Army Air Corps. He was a bomber pilot. And the Army used psychometric testing on their pilots to find out why some teams performed really well and some teams didn't. When the war was over, he spent about 10 years developing his own tool using psychometrics at MIT and Harvard with some of the best thinkers in the space to build a tool for business.
And really, in a lot of respects, became a very recognized tool through the late 60s, 70s, into the 80s. But again, as you said, a diamond in the rough, perhaps not the full distribution that it deserved.
Well, I think he was a reluctant entrepreneur. I mean, we knew his psychometric profile. He was that of a scholar. He was into the idea behind the psychometric tool, not the selling or deployment of it. He was sort of reluctantly selling it, which is why he started a distribution channel. And to this day, we sell through a distribution channel because the founder didn't like to sell. He liked to create the science, the intellectual property, but sort of give it to other people to deploy.
Classic academic model. If you build it, they will come. Let's forget about market dynamics.
Yeah. And, he really only, when we bought the company in 2014, there were only 47 distributors. Value-added distributors, they were very talented people. They came mostly back when it was paper and pencil. Mm-hmm. And clearly we needed to digitize this and make it a SaaS platform. We now have 300 distributors 5 years later.
And those are global, or is it national predominantly? Or?
It's global. 80% of our distributors are here domestically, but we have coverage, China, South Africa, all over Europe. Pretty broad coverage, surprisingly.
And those distributors typically tend to be talent acquisition, or they tend to be in the consulting space, human resource?
They look like management consultants who take a focus on people side of things. Some of them do come through talent, HR space, but most would look like management consultants with a focus on people, talent-related issues.
And so, really fascinating story. So you guys, just going back to the beginning again, you were a user of the product. You saw its value, satisfied user, obviously, and looked to acquire the company, but it wasn't for sale at the time. And so you guys were persistent, as entrepreneurs can tend to be.
Yeah, 5 years of knocking on the door, and quite tragically, the founder had 4 children. They all died prematurely, and none of them had kids. So the youngest daughter, when she was in hospice, she told the then CEO, Nancy Martini, all things being equal, would love you to sell the business to Mike and Daniel. So after she passed, the trustee, connected with us and said, if you want to buy this company, it's available. We won't even bring it out to a broker. We'll just sell it to you if you meet the appraised price.
Interesting. So how did you develop the relationship? Was that also
It was
just,
cold calling. It
Okay.
was traditional cold calling, but cold calling the CEO, talking to them about the business, why we liked the space. She actually tried to hire Daniel and I, and we're like, we're not hireable. We sort of buy companies, but she wasn't offended by that. She says, "Well, we'll stay close." So occasionally we'd have dinner, knock on the door, check in, see how things are going.
So now you've acquired this 60-year-old company. You've expanded the distribution network. And what about product? What about the future development? Where do you guys see the company going?
The family was using it as an ATM. They weren't investing in the company.
So essentially a cash cow.
It was a true cash cow. So we revalidated the science, we rebuilt the software. We had to retool the team, a new strategy, new distribution or additional distribution. And after we did the foundation building, after about 3 years, now we started developing new product. And we developed a platform for talent optimization. So it wasn't just a behavioral science piece. It was a full suite, which will help people make sure that their business strategy and their talent strategy mesh.
Okay, so it's really about aligning the talent with the strategy. And are those tools used for individuals? They're used for teams, both?
It's used for individuals at pre and post hire. Make sure you're a good fit for your job. Also make sure you work well with your manager and your team interpersonally. The real strategic piece is there are tools which help business leaders make sure their strategy is aligned with their senior team. And then after they get alignment on their strategy, is your senior team actually a good fit to execute on that strategy? Because strategies don't really execute themselves. People do. So you can see, if you took Mass General Hospital, which is a center of excellence, and you asked them, say Bain Capital gave them a ton of money, let's go on a buying spree and buy every hospital. That team, as great as they are, couldn't go on a buying spree. That's not in their DNA.
Right.
They're into running a center of excellence. So you have to make sure that your team is well positioned to execute on your strategy.
So you guys provide the analytical tools to be able to look into somebody's, as you talk about DNA and see whether or not it aligns with the organization and what the organization is driving to accomplish. Do you rely on your consulting distribution partners to then help companies to execute? Because, it's one thing to have sort of the roadmap. It's a whole second thing to say, okay, how are we going to get from A to B?
It's so critical. If I gave a CEO a log into the software, some would figure it out, most wouldn't. But if they had a problem or if they wanted to really go deep, you can't do it without the distribution channel of value-added partners, because they bring it to life within companies. And you need that sort of spark in a company of knowledge transfer. They have to understand how to use the tools. Now, this is no different. If you bought HubSpot, if you don't spend money to implement it and learn it, you're not going to get the value out of it. Right. So every software product needs some sort of knowledge transfer. So our partners do that with the talent space.
And is that something that you guys oversee? You have a guidance, or is that very much there's a vetting process to getting them on board, and at that point they have to have the capability to be able to
We do a lot of training of our partners. Just this week we have 25 partners in our company at our learning center in Westwood, training them how to be partners. And we train and we retrain, but it's also great having them sort of riff on our stuff and bring their own thing, because that's product development. They come up with a good idea, and we're like, that's a good idea. Let's build it into the software.
So really interesting where I see you guys have taken, as you talked about, a 60-year-old startup and applied what appears to be really a new industry paradigm to it. The software industry, it sounds like user groups, bringing people together, really allowing them to help develop, next generation product to time test, to really try your product out and to give you guys the tools or at least the information to drive it to the next generation, to the new releases, et cetera, whatever that might look like.
It is very much, and it's a symbiotic relationship, because if you are a management consultant or you're an HR consultant, you basically eat what you kill. And consulting can be a tough business because you don't really have recurring revenue.
Sure.
When they embrace our instruments, our tools, our system, they get recurring revenue and they get a data model, which helps them do their job better. So a lot of people are saying, you're going to make my practice better. And we in turn say, you're going to make our product better as you discover new stuff. So very symbiotic.
Interesting. And again, it has that value add for your partners to have that recurring revenue stream as you talk about, and obviously using in their sales efforts, I would imagine. And you talked about, before we came on air, we talked a little bit about the value of being a salesperson, using your tool and knowing what's on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys, not only did you acquire, a long history of using the product, but you talked a little bit about the proprietary, or the not necessarily the IP, but the historical database of profiles that came along with the company, which must be fascinating.
It is fascinating. To have Jimmy Hoffa. I mean, most of our audience probably doesn't know who Jimmy Hoffa is, but he was the head of the Teamsters Union.
Nobody, you haven't seen The Irishman?
I haven't yet. Was he in there? Great.
Yeah, it's a whole story. You've got to, you got to take about 3 weeks to watch it because it's a 3.5 hour.
I'm now looking forward to it. But we know Jimmy Hoffa's pattern. He wasn't a client, but he became friendly with the founder, Arnold Daniels, and we got his profile. We got Steve Jobs' profile. So
it's interesting, and one of the things that I see often in companies and in entrepreneurial organizations that use tools of the PI sort is, there's sort of people that fall into, I would say, almost two camps. Ones that say, hey, this is gold, and they believe steadfastly in the value of using the tools. And I think very often you see people that are, perhaps not in the middle, but at the other end of the spectrum, who say, oh, that doesn't provide any value to us. It's very, standardized tests, put everybody into a bucket or into several buckets, and that's the profile, and that's not really true. And so how do you reconcile those two worlds, and do you see that often where?
It certainly is polarizing. There are often people who don't like to be pigeonholed or bucketed. I think you focus on the people who are enlightened. If you give people information on a human being, it's really decoding how they like to work and operate and think. So it might be like, it's not that I dislike you, I might dislike the way you work. And if you and I are forced to work together, say you're my boss, I need to figure that out, or I'm going to have a miserable existence working for you. So you give them a code key on how you like to work. And if we figure that out, we're going to have a much better relationship. I don't know why people dismiss that. It's sort of like free knowledge on someone, but some do. So we try and focus on the people who are already enlightened and willing to go down that path.
Not everyone's willing to do yoga.
Not everyone's willing to do yoga.
No, absolutely. You drive to something which I find very interesting, because they're data points. They're data points. It's knowledge. It's information to help an individual within an organization lever their own relationships and understand which levers to pull, which not to pull in dealing with somebody. And I think, as you talk about, is insight. So that's why Joe reacts the way Joe does to when I do X. Yeah. And now it's up to the individual to want to adjust their own style to align, mesh with, et cetera, an individual.
We have a big mission internally, of better workplaces to make a better world. And if you put someone in the right job, if you fix their manager-subordinate relationships, if you make their team dynamics really sing and hum, we make people happier, more energized. So they go home to be a better spouse, a better parent, a better community member. And because people just spend too much time at work life is too short to have miserable work time. 50 hours a week, it's just not worth it.
And you also, nice to hear that you have a small mission.
It's a small mission, just a better world.
Aim low. Fascinating stuff. Well, Mike, it's been a real pleasure. Sounds like you guys are really taken, as you called it, a diamond in the rough and levered it up nicely. I won't ask at this point what your plan is. I assume as a serial entrepreneur, at some point you'll look to build this thing and look for the next opportunity.
The category king of talent. That's what we're doing. Talent optimization.
If people want to get in touch with you, if our listeners are interested in finding more about Predictive Index or perhaps being distributors, what's the best way for them to reach you?
PredictiveIndex.com. And we have an annual conference, Optima, if they want to really learn about talent optimization. we've got some great keynote speakers. We had Billy Bean last year,
Oh, wow.
which was our keynote, and Mel Robbins closed. And we can't announce the new ones, but it's going to be a great palette of speakers.
Fabulous. Well, we look forward to hearing about it. Fabulous to get some insight from the King of Talent. Great stuff. Our guest at Radio Entrepreneurs has been Mike Zani with Predictive Index, and it was a pleasure having you on Radio Entrepreneurs.
No, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And we'll be right back with another segment on